Road to Possible presents Road to Equality.
Hi, I'm Jillian Rees-Brown. Welcome to Road to Equality. I'm thinking about when I was younger. I used to think about the fact that we're all trying to be the same, and honoring people's differences seemed important to me. I don't know what the answers are, but it seemed to me it would make more sense rather than trying to make other people the same as me or try and find some unified way of being, that it would be better to honor people's differences and get to know what makes us different as opposed to what makes us the same. And maybe that would be the way to understand other people, not be so afraid, and get along, hopefully. Find ways that we can work together, work with each other. Hopefully that's the way the world is going now. It's hard to know. As a young woman, I was part of the theater community, and I was doing fairly well, getting work here and there, but I did belong to a group called Women in Theater, and we would talk about the fact, and some of these facts haven't changed a lot, but in those days, before I'd had children, so maybe when I was in my early 20s, most of the artistic directors in theaters in Canada were male, and male artistic directors would tend to gravitate towards stories that would be of interest to men, and a lot of histories and that sort of thing have been written mostly about men, so a lot of the roles that were available were mostly for men, and just seemed to be a lot less opportunity for women. And another part of that issue was also women weren't writing women. There are some great writers, male writers who've written great parts for women too, but I think there is value in women writing for women as well, because the same way men understand men, women understand women in those ways, and maybe we understand the differences a little more. Currently, I'm with a group called Act 3. It's all women over 50. We've spent the last year, because of COVID, we've all been in our own homes, but meeting online and sharing stories towards creating a play that we hope will start workshopping in this coming fall. We've been very successful in getting some grant money towards that end, and hopefully with workshopping we'll have more than one show. The writing has been amazing. We've all been writing short pieces and getting together every 2 weeks to read our pieces, share them with each other, get feedback. We also have one of our members who will be our director, who is also a great dramaturge, so we've been getting individual work from her, dramaturgy, as well as the general help that we've gotten from the other members of the group. Some of these pieces have taken on a bit of a life. There was one piece that was part of the Fringe Next Stage Festival in January, and that was, of course, digital. It had to be digital, even though it's written as a play. So that was recorded, and that has also been used to support our applications for money, for grant funding. And there was another piece that was also recorded since. We've got a wonderful group of women. Partly there's the age thing, we're all women, but there's I'd say close to 50% of our group are BIPOC. I'm not sure of people's sexual orientation necessarily, but there are definitely, we've got Asian women, we've got Aboriginal, we've got Black women. And the gifts that they contribute to this group, I mean, the group in general is so powerful. And it's just wonderful how everything is being embraced. And at this point, we're just putting everything we can out there, and we'll start workshopping things in the fall to make sure that things, you know, we develop an actual show out of them. But the writing has been phenomenal, and like I say, it's coming from so many different directions. Also our skill level, some women are singers, some are dancers, some have been writing for years, some are filmmakers. It's just amazing, and I'm really excited about what we're going to come up with. I think one of the things about the work that I've been doing lately, and some of the people that I've been working with, is the diversity and the richness of that hearing the stories from different perspectives, and how much I'm learning. I'm not sure. I guess as we evolve, we're starting to be able to open up our personal borders or whatever. I don't understand the fear behind approaching something new or different. Maybe it's what I don't understand is how it's approached, and I'm not sure if this is a male thing or a human thing, where, you know, something new and foreign, you know, approaching it with a gun or violence, or, you know, why would that be the first step? I would think that it would be far more useful to try and approach people without that fear and anger at first, and find our commonalities and find ways to enrich each other's lives rather than push them away or try to conform them to what we're already living. It's wonderful to be able to open up and accept ideas from different walks of life, I guess. And also these days, I think we're in a very difficult time, because I'm grateful that a lot of things are being exposed that are so wrong. And, you know, I'm learning myself as a white person, as a woman, as an older person. I'm learning about things that I have been brought up believing as well, and the things that I need to change, and just thoughts and ideas that get ingrained in us from somewhere in our life that just sort of wonder, where did that come from? But on a personal note, I've been fascinated with, I'm originally from Newfoundland, and I have been fascinated with the original people in Newfoundland, the Beothuk, who I've read about. When I first learned about them, I read about them, and unfortunately this was a horrible case of genocide, the settlers coming and bringing their ways, sometimes coming and taking what they wanted from the land and the sea, and leaving whatever behind. Of course, the Aboriginal people there were used to living more nomadically, where they would move to the sea for the summer times and into the interior for the winters. That's how they would get their food and how they lived their lives. So they weren't used to this idea of property and ownership, and the fear that I guess came about from the settlers or the Europeans coming and taking from the land and the sea, and not understanding how there was so much that they could have learned from the people that had been living there for 1,000 years, of how to hunt, how to fish, how to live in that world. At first, I don't think the Europeans were interested in living there. They just were coming to get more goods to bring back to use in their land. And unfortunately, what happened was the people that were there, the Beothuk, were abused. They weren't violent people in the sense that they didn't take guns. They never used the guns, but they tended to. They were very good at hiding. This is of course from what I've been reading and what I've learned about them, and who knows if even what I've been reading is real. A lot of that is written by white historians or white people, like maybe lawyers and politicians who were writing legal papers or whatever at the time, and I guess we'll never really know the true stories. But what we do know and what has been learned from archaeology, I think I'd hate for them to be further obscured into oblivion. It's the culture and the physical people of the time of the Beothuk were wiped out. I'm happy that people who've been silenced for so long are getting more of a chance to speak out, to have a voice, and I think that's going to help us to not be as frightened of each other, to not be, because a lot of times we're frightened of the unknown. So the more we know seems to me to make more sense. I've been taking a course online called Indigenous Canada, which has been fantastic. I'm only in my second week of it, but I can see there's a lot to learn. There is a lot, and it's wonderful. It's a really good course. So I'm hoping for me that's going to make things a lot less mysterious, and I think that's probably what will help all of us, is to become more aware of each other, as opposed to turning our backs on things and trying to force people to be like us. Start really opening our hearts up to where other people have come from. We've all walked every individual has its own path, so we have to be kinder. Of course, thinking of Demasduit, the woman, she died of tuberculosis. It's been more than 200 years now, just a little over 200 years ago. And at some point, a man felt that it was worth exhuming her remains and her husband's and taking them to his friend at a Scottish museum for research. I'm not sure what they did with them or what was ever accomplished, but for the past 200 years those remains were in Scotland and held at this museum. There's a Mi'kmaq chief in Newfoundland who I had the pleasure of meeting, and who has really made it his mission to have their remains brought back to their homeland, hopefully to where they were actually buried. It's taken him a few years. He had to take it right to the governments of Canada, to the government of Scotland. He would travel to Scotland. He would perform ceremonies for them there. And March of 2020, just before everything shut down for this pandemic that we're in the middle of still, their remains were brought back to Newfoundland. He was successful in getting both Demasduit and her husband's remains brought to St. John's, to a place there called the Rooms, which is like a large museum and holds the archives, etc. So they've made it back to Newfoundland soil, and that took, the government of Canada requesting their return. And she was captured in March, over 200 years before that, and that was why she was given the name Mary March. And now Her real name is Demasduit. To be honest, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing it properly. I'm pronouncing it the way I see it written. I guess an English writing of it. But I feel it's closer to what her real name was. I've been concerned that the museum that does have a lot of wonderful historical information about them and about the archaic people before them. That it goes way back in Newfoundland historic times. That museum is actually called the Merry March Museum, which I really wish they would change the name of it. I know I'm not the first person to ask that they change it. I wrote a small piece last year about a character in the stories that I've been writing. There's one character who was a real white woman named Cassie Jewar, who worked for the Paytons, who were the people that captured Demasduit and named her Merry March. And I have been writing things from Cassie's perspective because I want to tell the women's stories. And of course it's all in my imagination and a little bit of research and writing that there has been about them. I tried to write a piece last year about Cassie being conjured into the rooms where the remains of Demasduit were, and her wondering why she would be brought back there, learning about the travel of Demasduit's remains, and the fact that they have the museum named Merry March. And I was writing about Cassie, being concerned about that and making that the issue of this little short script that I wanted to include in a festival in St. John's last year. But I was stopped. Some things I'm stopping myself, but even when I have approached people and tried to have anything see a bit more life, I've been stopped. And I totally understand the need to speak for the people who are being spoken about, to be the ones doing the speaking. Unfortunately, there are no Beothuk to speak for themselves, and that was the response I was getting then, was that they felt it would be disrespectful because there is no one to speak positively or negatively about them who really knew them or was part of one of those people. And I've been studying it and writing about them for a long time, and now in the climate over the past 2 or 3 years especially has seen that to be, it's not my place, which I totally understand. I understand, the phrase, not about us, without us. Unfortunately, the Beothuk aren't there and can't tell their own stories anymore. I've been trying to reach out to different people of Indigenous backgrounds. There aren't Beothuk to reach out to, but I've been trying to find people who would be interested in working with me. It's a very dark, difficult story to work on. The language was lost. That was what attracted me first to them, was the few hundred words that were, I guess, that were recorded by somebody back when there were some of the people still around. And there's not even enough words to put a proper sentence together. There's a lot of nouns, a few verbs. So it's very hard to know how they spoke to each other. Their histories must have been oral and have been lost. It's what we have learned from the papers that have been written and from the last of the Beothuks, Shauna did it, who learned English and wrote down stories, drew pictures, and talked a lot about what she understood of her people. That's the most information we have from an actual Beothuk, who was, I think, 28 years old when she died. how could she have known as much as she did about a civilization that had been around for over 1,000 years and now had spent probably most of her life running from the white people that were coming and taking over their lands and their lifestyles, and making life so difficult for them. It was genocide. It's such a dark and heavy story to think about and to talk about and to research. And I would love to collaborate with people who have much more of an understanding of what it is like for Indigenous people in this country. I would love to connect with people and continue working on this story. And I feel like I have a lot of empathy for what happened to these people. And I think, unfortunately, that I feel like I'm up against so many brick walls and I can't move forward with it. And a lot of this is happening without anybody even reading what I've been writing. It's probably based just because I'm white that I'm being stopped. But I just really feel like there's so much fear. I'm of course wanting to. I'm embarrassed and I feel horrible about what has been done to these people by people, I guess, that I'm descended from. Maybe not personally, but I am a white person, and it was my people who have. We're seeing so much being revealed, like today, even with the children being uncovered at residential schools. I mean, it's unbelievable to think, for me to think, that any of this could have been considered the right thing to do. And I guess that's what I want to expose in my writing, is that how wrong I feel all of that was. And it's kind of hard to be shut down when nobody's even reading what I'm writing. Nobody has been able to offer to help or found a desire to help, even with exploring the language or things that aren't even that controversial. But there are some really heavy subjects involved in the stories I'm trying to tell, and it's hard. But I also wonder, when will we be able to talk about the things that we do understand, or that we are? When will we be able to learn? Will these people be completely in oblivion, or only remembered by the way that the white settlers remembered them? I really don't know the answers, and I don't think other Aboriginal or Indigenous people have the answers either. They're much closer to it than I would be, and I would love to explore that sometime with someone who would have more knowledge. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I hope that people. Right now, we're in such a cancel kind of culture that it's hard to know what we can say and when we can say things, or to have an opinion, whether it's an encouraging and positive opinion or not. For now, I'm keeping things close and respecting the need to find a better place where there is some kind of equality, where we can talk about these stories, whether it's correct or not, or what is correct. The things are it's so difficult right now to know. It breaks my heart not to be able to tell the story of this wonderful woman, Demasduit, who was given an English name that still to this day is the name of the museum in her name. It should be her name, but I'd like to continue this fight, but for now, I'm just going to respect the people whose voice needs to be heard first. And maybe someday I can contribute.
again?
No justice!
No peace! Thank you for being
No
here.
justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. Make sure to reach out to us with your comments and feedback.